I don't sound nearly as good as I look.
And in 5. Wow. When do I ever start at 5?
And in 32, 31.
And in 3, 2. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Team Morale Podcast, where we do our 3 favorite things: talk a little bit of booze, a little bit of beer, and a whole lot of basketball. E and the tall guy are back with you again. Mitch, how are you today?
I am fine. I'm good. I'm fine. Today is a bit of a somber day, and we are going to talk about some of our feelings about the passing of Kobe on this day last year. But before we jump into that, I want to talk about the whiskey of the day. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, let's get into the whiskey.
All right. We are drinking Yellow Rose, the premium American whiskey, a fusion of character just like Texas culture. All right. So Yellow Rose comes out of Houston very proudly. That is like all over their website is we could have gone out into the boonies somewhere else, but we wanted to be right in the heart of Houston, and that's exactly where we live right now. And just like a lot of the whiskeys that we have tried out, especially some of these newer ones, because Texas is a kind of a newer whiskey state, it was just a couple of friends on a night out. They got drunk, and they're like, you know what we should do? We should start a distillery. Let's make our own whiskey.
Man, we are in the wrong profession, dude. The amount of just random people that are just like, you know what, let's do it. And then they do it. Like, hey, Mitch, you want to make a whiskey?
Like, let's just make a whiskey.
Let's just do it.
I got nothing better going on right now.
Why not?
I'm sitting here making a podcast. I could be making whiskey.
What are we doing?
And one little fun fact about them is that the Yellow Rose name actually comes from a character of local folklore, a woman known as the Yellow Rose, and she's a Texas legend for her bravery that helped Sam Houston win the battle for Texas and independence over Mexico.
Interesting.
Yes.
I had never heard of Yellow Rose.
I have never heard of one Yellow Rose either, but apparently she could kick some ass.
If anyone knows who Yellow Rose is, let us know, because our education failed us, I guess, because I don't know who Yellow Rose is.
I can't believe my Oregon high school education didn't teach me anything about Yellow Rose of the Texas battles.
Yeah, what the heck, man?
What the heck, Oregon?
For real though, it tastes very interesting. Like as soon as it hits your lips, it's a different flavor than the last couple of whiskeys that we've had. It's very, very, very sweet, and it's very brown sugary.
It is sweet. It is very, very sweet. Yeah, I mean, as soon as you drink it, it has got all sorts of different kind of sugary flavors in it, which I am going to do my best to dissect.
Yeah, it's going to take a minute here. We are just tasting it for the first time, but it is real sweet, and it's got a lot of, in my opinion, caramel and brown sugar are the two things I'm tasting the most.
Yeah, I'm going to keep kind of trying it out before I...
Maybe molasses.
Molasses?
I might be getting a little bit of molasses. Like
some
it
agave
like,
or
like
something?
a molasses cookie, almost. Like a molasses cookie flavored whiskey.
All right. I'm going to keep tasting it and see if I can't dissect a few flavors myself.
By that, you mean you're going to Google it later in the podcast? Right?
Look, I may or may not... I like knowing the flavors, but also, like, I want to taste it a little bit before I just spew off whatever it is I think this tastes like.
All right, so not to bring the mood down, but it is something we definitely have to talk about as basketball fans, because it is one of the most tragic and jarring things that has ever happened in sports and has ever happened in definitely the history of basketball, and that is the passing of NBA legend, Lakers superstar, Hall of Famer, and just game revolutionizer that was Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, today is officially the 1 year passing. We are recording this on January 26th, and
you guys will be seeing this tomorrow.
Yes, you'll be seeing this, listening to this tomorrow, and we just wanted to give some of our thoughts. We are both kind of in unique, different categories when it comes to the Kobe Bryant experience. For me, I spent the majority of my life hating Kobe Bryant. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. He killed the Blazers more than any other player in NBA history ever has, and he's broken my heart so many times. Kobe Bryant was a straight up killer, and I hated playing the Lakers because I knew that Kobe was just going to do some stuff that just was going to end up killing me at the end of the night, because that's who he was.
Yeah, I mean, competitor, demolisher. If he was up 50, he wasn't up enough. He wanted to not only beat you, but stomp you into the ground and just assert dominance over you. And I grew up in LA and I loved Kobe. I thought he was badass. I thought everything he did was super cool. His Mamba mentality, his attention to detail, his overall dissection of the game, the way he played the game was with so much like athleticism, so much grit, so much hustle, so much just anger and like meanness and toughness about him, while also being super thoughtful and super smart and super technical, and like everything he did had a reason and a purpose. It was just super awesome to watch someone who was head and shoulders both mentally and physically in the game.
Yeah, and one thing I'm always going to like admire Kobe is that he was one of the last guys that's like, I'm going to stick with this team. He very, very narrowly moved to the Chicago Bulls mid-career, kind of post-Shaq, and instead he decided to stick with LA. He was a lifer. He was with the Lakers through thick and thin. There were some tough years that they had in there, but he still went on to win 5 championships, 2 with him as like the only like star, not only star, they had Powell, but like as like the focal point guy. And he was just like you said it, he was just like a tough competitor. Like could not get into Kobe. The amount of times I saw guys like try to do like throw the ball in Kobe's face and he just like refuses to flinch. The man was made of steel. He was just like he had the most steely nerves of anyone all time. It was amazing getting to watch Kobe as growing up as like a young NBA fan.
Yeah, I mean, he just broke so many hearts.
Oh, I know.
He ruined people.
Well aware.
I mean, growing up, watching him, that shot he hit against the Suns in the playoffs, that elbow jumper that won them the game, just absolutely amazing. The 81 points against the Raptors, the amount of buzzer beaters, that bank shot against the Heat. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the iconic shots, moments, and plays he's had. His last game brought tears to many eyes, including my own. Just so much emotion, so much just craziness about it. I mean, he was amazing and must-watch TV.
Yeah, all the time, every time. He treated every, random Wednesday night regular season game against some lowly Bobcats team. He treated that like it was Game 7 of the finals. That was just how he was hardwired. Every single moment mattered. Every single game mattered. And if you were on his team and you took a playoff, you better get ready to get your ass chewed out, because that's just who Kobe Bryant was. And that's what we that's what we all like. That's the Mamba mentality, and that's what the world has taken from Kobe's passing, is the adoption of the Mamba mentality.
Yeah, going off that, I am a big believer in the fact that Kobe's best years were ahead of him when he tragically passed away. I think that he was one that was going to not only do great things for sports, but do great things for art, do great things for just entertainment in general. He was, I mean, his poetry and his thought, like his attention to detail and thought process was so like attacking everything that I think he was going to do great things. His show Detail, if you ever saw it, if you haven't seen it, it is very interesting. The way when he hosted it, they still do it now with like other players, but when he was the guy on it, it was so interesting watching him. He would spend like an hour breaking down one basketball play, like one possession.
Yeah.
And he would just go into depth on every single thing, and things you don't even think of. The way that guy's shoe was placed here and the way his ankle turned here, like everything was such a close attention to detail was ridiculous. The things he was doing for the WNBA and for women's sports and with his daughters, the way he was being a father, like he was going to do so many great things. I think that it's a tragic loss for sports, but it's a tragic loss for the world just as much so.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I spent majority of my basketball life hating Kobe Bryant, but I loved post NBA Kobe Bryant. I totally agree that we had yet to see the best of his life, stuff. Like his NBA career was always going to be amazing, but he was going to accomplish so much more as an individual post his NBA career, because he turned out to be such a nice guy, such a good dude, such a good dad. The WNBA has said multiple times that they think that they're not going to be able to grow to the places that they wanted to be because Kobe's not around. They really thought that Kobe was going to be a huge like launching points and like endorser for the WNBA, and he won it was an Academy Award, right, with his Dear Basketball, which if you haven't seen that, it hits in a completely different way watching it now post his tragic death.
Yeah, it was a tearjerker before,
yeah,
but now it's hard to watch.
Yeah, it really is. And so it was incredibly sad. It was so shocking. I'm always going to remember the moment that it happened. I was working with the Trailblazers, and I was standing in line to get in through security. There I was with a couple of my coworkers, and I read it off my phone, and in front of me was a couple people in front of me I didn't even realize was Jermaine O'Neal, who played against Kobe in his mid-prime, and he was like, "What?" I was like, "Kobe just passed away." And he started kind of like, welling up and tearing up and kind of like went on with his crew. But it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I just kind of experienced that moment with, Jermaine O'Neal and with some of my other buddies, and everyone was in tears.
Yeah, it was a shocking day. It was a sad day. As everyone knows, he wasn't the only one that passed away tragically in that helicopter flight. There was other people involved, other families, other loved ones. So it was just a very sad, tragic day all the way around. Just the start of a very terrible year, but he's going to be remembered as the beginning of that, because the loss of Kobe was just so influential.
Shocking. Yeah, it's shocking. He seemed like a guy like he couldn't die.
He was immortal.
That was like the feeling that you kind of got with Kobe. It was like he was gonna die at like 200 years old on his own time frame.
Yeah, I mean, the way he dominated everybody, he was like, well, of course he's gonna dominate everything too. And I mean, the way the city of LA reacted with all the gatherings and all the memorials, and in Philadelphia at his high school, the big memorial they had there, and watching some of the coverage on ESPN or on TNT and listening to the guys and anchors and his teammates and friends and everyone try to put into words on camera and watching them break down. It's just crazy how one man impacted so many people that he never even met.
So true. It's so true. One of the first things that always comes to my mind whenever I think Kobe is his very last game against the Utah Jazz, and where he put up 60 points in a comeback effort to beat the Utah Jazz, who people don't think that the Jazz were just like, oh, we're going to let Kobe win. They went into that game thinking that if they won that game, they were going to make the playoffs. They were fighting for a playoff spot that very last game. And so this wasn't just a scrub team that was just letting Kobe have it. They were giving it to Kobe, and he did it all on his own that night.
Yeah, I mean, that game, we were actually just watching highlights of that game before we hit record here, and it is eerie. It gave me goosebumps. Mm-hmm. It's just wild how it was just crazy. I mean, he had a rough first half. He shot, a million. I mean, we could pull up his stats, but he shot 1,000,000 times. But he also made clutch buckets at the end of the game.
Okay, so you look those up real quickly. But yeah, that last game, I was watching it in my dorm room with my roommate Jack at the time, and we were being so loud that our RA showed up from 3 doors over to tell us to be quiet, and we're like, no, we're not going to be quiet. You should be watching this game too. This is history that we're watching.
Yeah, so I got his stats here. First off, Kobe played 42 minutes, which is crazy for as old as he was. And just going into this, the Lakers ended the season 17-65. The Jazz ended the season 40-42. So you're right, they were in the thick of the playoff hunt. But Kobe ended with 60 points on 22 of 50 shooting. The man shot the ball 50 times.
It's what he did best. He did best.
And he went 6 for 21 from 3, which means outside of his 3-point shooting, he was cooking from inside the arc.
Yeah.
He went 10 of 12 from the line, And also found a way to get 4 dimes in there as well, just in case you were wondering.
He figured out a way to pass the ball a couple times in the middle of this game.
Yep, he did. I mean, everyone knew he was going to go in. I remember beforehand, Shaq was like joking with him, like, "Hey, go try to get 30 or something like that."
I think it was 40 or 50 or something.
He tried to
like
go
that.
get 40 or something like that, and Kobe was like, "I see your bet.
I raise you.
Hold my beer."
So overall, yes, incredibly sad moment, and something that's gonna go down in the history books. It was a crazy start to this crazy year, and this is gonna be a day that every single year people look back and talk about Kobe Bean Bryant.
Yeah, definitely a guy whose just abilities and just overall demeanor and just his approach on life impacted a lot of people. Prayers up to not only the Bryant family, but everyone involved in that helicopter crash. Just a very tragic, upsetting day that affected a lot of people, and made the world kind of band together a little bit for a little while. But weird transition here. But the last team that Kobe played against was the Utah Jazz, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive on the Utah Jazz here at the second half of this podcast, because they have been killing it so far this year. But before we get into that, let's talk about this whiskey a little bit more.
Let's do it. I'm going to pour myself a second glass of Yellow Rose. Oh, you'll hear the squeaky cork that it comes out of. Okay, so when I first took a couple sips of this, the very first thing was like, oh my gosh, this is so sugary. I kind of thought that it tasted a little bit like Ethan's favorite Tennessee honey, but I agree with him that it doesn't have a bunch of the honey taste. It's a different kind of sugary taste. But as it got diluted more into the ice, which my ice is pretty much gone at this point, I almost thought that it definitely tasted a little bit more weedy, and it leveled out quite a bit.
Yeah, the sweetness definitely went down after. Honestly, it got now that I'm drinking it warmer, now that it's not cold, the sweetness hasn't hit me as much. I definitely get the weedy. Mm-hmm. I agree with the weedy. I do still get sweetness. I still do get brown sugar. I stand by my molasses cookie
thing.
You know what I'm talking about? Those molasses cookies. That's what I'm sticking with it. I'm rolling with that.
No, I like it a lot. I think that, you will probably, as we say, these flavors are pretty typical in a lot of whiskeys, but you definitely, with the sweetness, you get little bits of vanilla, you get little bits of caramel, you get little bits of brown sugar. Overall, I like it. I think that it's a really easy whiskey to drink. This would be one of those that I would describe as good for a first-time whiskey drinker, or your people who don't drink a whole lot of whiskey in the first place but like sweeter tasting things. Yellow Rose would be really good for you.
Yep, I can have it in moderation. It's too sweet to have a more than, I would say, 2 glasses of it.
It'd be tough to down a whole bottle of this, because
it's tough to down a whole bottle of anything.
For you, it might be. Me and my dad will happily pound a bottle together, but maybe not this, because it is quite sugary. But still very good. I would recommend it. People, go and try it out.
Yeah, definitely worth giving a look to. Let's jump into our deep dive here. It's going to be a quicker deep dive, but because we had to talk Kobe for the first half of the podcast, but the absolutely. The second half, we have to talk about not even arguably, the hottest team in the NBA, and probably the most surprising team in the NBA. That's, I guess, the most positively surprising team in the NBA to this point.
Yeah, 8-2 in their last 10, and those 8 wins are in a row right now.
They are on fire, and I hate to say it because they have my Mavericks up next.
Yeah, dude, that's not good for you. So they're currently sitting at 12-4. They are 1 game back of the Lakers, who are 14-4. And they are pretty much tied with the Clippers, who are at 13-5, but 1 less loss, 1 less win. The Jazz have won their last 8 games, which have come against the Knicks, the Warriors, the Pelicans, the Nuggets, the Hawks, the Cavaliers, the Pistons, and the Bucks. That isn't a very impressive list, especially when you're considering that the fact that Pistons were an easy win, but the Cavs are not that easy of a win these days. Neither are the Hawks, neither are the Nuggets. Neither are the Knicks, quite frankly. Knicks have actually been playing some pretty good basketball.
It's weird. Everyone's good this year.
Yeah,
Everyone is good this year.
except for the Timberwolves.
They're bad, but everyone else is good this
Little
year.
Timberwolves slander right now.
But yeah, they are winning. They're winning in a multitude of ways. They have a lot of people that they can rely on. They have, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players averaging over 10 points a game, with 3 of them averaging over 15 points a game in Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley, and Jordan Clarkson. And that's just like, I mean, you've got Bojan Bogdanovic averaging 14. You've got Joe Ingles averaging 10. Rudy Gobert is averaging 12 and 13 and a half with 2.7 blocks a game. Like, everyone's playing super well.
All right, so I'm going to spit out some team stats. They're actually 9. My app just updated because they won tonight. They're 9-1 in their last 10 with 9 straight wins. Anyways,
Holy cow.
Here are some team stats compared to other teams that I think really tell the tale of the Utah Jazz this year. First of all, they take more 3-point field goal attempts than anyone else in the entire NBA. Very first. Their field goal percentage, second in the entire. Their 3-point field goal percentage is second in the entire NBA at 40.3%.
That's scorching.
Scorching hot. How are they doing in rebounds, you may ask? They're the number 1 rebounding team in the entire NBA. All right, now, well, maybe their defense falters off a little bit. Number 3 defense in the entire NBA, allowing 107.1 per game. Number 6 offense overall in the NBA, averaging 114.3 points per game. 4th in effective field goal percentage. 7th in true shooting percentage. These guys are efficient. They are taking tons of threes, and they are playing terrific defense. This is the Jazz team that a lot of people were talking about were dark horse title contenders going into last season.
Yeah, I mean, they have all the pieces here. They have a playmaker in Donovan Mitchell. They have a secondary playmaker in Mike Conley. They have 3-point shooting in Ingles, Bogdanovic. Derek Favors is actually shooting threes now.
Oh, wow.
I think he is. Let me double check, but I'm pretty sure he is.
But
yeah, he's shooting... No, he's not. Never mind. Those are free throws. Never mind. Derek Favors is not shooting threes, but they have a ton of guys that are shooting threes. Mitchell, over 40% from 3. Royce O'Neal, 46% from 3. Mike Conley, 40% from 3. Clarkson, 40% from 3. Joe Ingles, 42.6% from 3. So they have a ton of guys shooting a ton of 3-pointers and shooting them efficiently. Like Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell together, let's see, shoot almost 15 threes a game, and they're shooting about 41% combined. That's wild.
Yeah, and so I'm looking up and down this roster, and the thing that like shouts out to me is, one, they have been very fortunately healthy. They haven't had anybody go down. They have had the same guys, the same number, like their same starting lineup, and their same like key bench players have all played all of the games outside of Joe Ingles missed 4 games. So they've been very fortunately healthy. But when I look at this team, they have 8 players deep, which is pretty much what your playoff rotation is going to be, is 8 players. And every single one of those guys is a baller. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about your starting lineup is Conley, Mitchell, Royce O'Neal, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Rudy Gobert, and off the bench is Jordan Clarkson, Joe Ingles, Derek Favors. That team is going to continue to be really good once playoffs come through.
Yeah, you never not have a playmaker on the floor with Mitchell, Conley, or Clarkson. Mm-hmm. You probably most of the time have 2 of them on the floor.
Joe Ingles is actually a pretty good creator, as is Bojan.
Yeah, so you never not have some sort of sniper on the floor between Mitchell, between Bogdanovic, between Jordan Clarkson, and between Ingles. You generally probably have 2 to 3 of them on the floor. Royce O'Neal shooting 46% from 3 will fall down. Like, there's no way he can keep that up. That's ridiculous.
You never know.
But it is crazy to me how efficient this team is, how many threes they're chucking up. The question that I'm going to pose to you, Mitch, is because the way this team is winning right now is they are taking a lot of threes and they're making a lot of threes. Mm-hmm. Is this style of basketball for this team sustainable?
I think it really is, because they're still middle of the pack in pace, which means like they're not out here out-athleting teams. They're not out here like just being a streaky shooting team. like running and gunning and stuff. Like they are taking their own time, like at their own pace, playing great. Obviously, they're going to have good rim defense. Gobert is
averaging 3 blocks a game. And
yeah.
I'll throw another one out. He's averaging 3 offensive rebounds a game.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So you're really starting to see like how good a team can be when your star is a guy that doesn't get buckets. Like Gobert is a star in the NBA, but he only gets 12 points per game, which allows the rest of their team. They could bring in a whole bunch of guys who like to get buckets, and it fits. Like Bojan Bogdanovic and Joe Ingles and Jordan Clarkson, those are guys that like they don't really fit unless they're dudes that are like can create a little bit and get their own buckets. And that works because you have a guy like Rudy Gobert who is going to be eating up minutes, but he's not going to want to shoot the ball a whole ton.
Yeah, he only shoots the ball 8 times a game. So their second leading shot taker a game is Jordan Clarkson, a guy coming off the bench. If that tells you anything about how this team is constructed.
Who, for the record, Jordan Clarkson is the heavy favorite to win Sixth Man of the Year right now.
I called that.
His betting odds are right now are plus 250, and I forget who was second place, but second place was plus 750. Like he is the heavy favorite to win Sixth Man of the Year at this juncture, and I don't really
keep going, man. Come on, I called this.
I don't really see it slowing down at all because they're really playing their pace. They're playing their style. They've beaten good teams. They've beaten bad teams. They've gone on runs. They've had a couple of losses and then bounced back. Like this is a team that I think is officially in the top echelon of the West and people need to take seriously and be very scared of.
Yeah, they have gone into the Clippers category for me. I don't know if they're ready to be in the Lakers category, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Just because the amount they rely on their 3-point shooting scares me a little bit, just because they can go in a slump and drop a bunch of games. That being said, they're just as scary to me as the Clippers.
Yeah.
Like, I think that this team is just as scary as the Clippers, and if I'm a team in the playoffs, I want to do anything I can to not match up with these guys.
Yeah. The thing with the Jazz is like they're not playing anyone that sucks. Like this is the old Chris Vernon adage where it's like don't play players that suck and you'll be fine, which is harder to do than you think it is. But all of these guys are vets. They know their role. They play well. They like play together.
They're well coached.
It's just a bunch of dudes that know exactly what their role on the team is. The only thing that like you would say when the playoffs come around is, well, do they have enough isolation scoring? Can they get it done in the half court? Is Rudy Gobert going to be a hindrance at that point more than a helper? So it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like come playoff time without like any what you would call superstars on their team. But they have so many good players along with I would call Rudy Gobert a defensive superstar. And Donovan Mitchell certainly can take the vault, which we've seen him put up 50 in the playoffs at this point. I don't know what much more you would want from him, but I don't know. I'm really liking this Jazz team right now. I'm loving what they're doing.
Yeah, and you were talking about the playoffs, and the reason you say isolation scoring is because generally in the playoffs, the pace slows down. It becomes a lot more of a matchup-based game. Generally, it's a lot more of like, where can I find an advantage against you in this situation, in this possession? And that's when isolation scoring becomes key, because let's get my best isolation scorer against one of your worst defenders and let him go to work. That's how the playoffs work in the NBA.
Yeah.
And this is where a team like the Jazz, defensively, I love it because they don't have a lot of holes. But offensively, outside of Mitchell and maybe Jordan Clarkson if he's on, or Conley if he's on, but like you run into a little bit of a scare there in terms of who can really go get a bucket.
Yeah, because at some point you're going to be relying on Bojan to be a 20-point getter in the playoffs. You know, at some point you're relying on Jordan Clarkson, who, in all fairness, Jordan Clarkson, he's been on some really good playoff teams with LeBron, but has never been the guy that's like been like heavily relied on to go and score a bunch in the playoffs.
And he's a guy that like needs to be relied on a little bit. He's a guy that needs to take shots to make shots, because He's a volume scorer. He's not an efficient scorer. He is at this point this year, but he's a volume scorer.
Yes. Total volume scorer, has never seen a shot that he didn't like. And there's a reason why he's tops for Six Man of the Year, because he's having a great season. And there's a chance that he is just popping right now and is playing in the perfect role, perfect system. He can come in off the bench and he can chuck just like he likes to do. And I hope that works for them come playoffs, because you really are. I mean, the odds are the team that you're playing is going to put their best defender on Donovan Mitchell. So if he does get limited, now you're relying on Bojan, Conley, Clarkson, or Ingles to go and get and be like a 20-point to 30-point scorer on any given night. And that's where I would start being worried.
Yeah, absolutely. It is it's about as good of a start to the year as the Jazz fans could ever want. That being said, you need to sustain it. It's a long season. We're a long way to go. We're only generally between 16 and 12 games into the year, depending on the team and how many you've had postponed, maybe a little bit more, 20 to 12 games. Mm-hmm. But we've got a long way to go, and you just got to keep stringing together wins. You just got to keep stringing together wins.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how long this win streak is going to go for. They're at 9 right now, longest that there's been in the NBA this season. They're just playing well, and the thing is, they're not beating a whole bunch of bad teams. They're beating a bunch of good teams.
That win streak has some really good wins in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so the Utah Jazz. Good for you guys. I am very, very happy for the fans of Utah, being a small market team with, a couple of underrated stars, and we're gonna see how high this team can go. They have a little bit of everything.
Yeah, they don't have a big weakness. Mm-hmm. They don't have a spot where you look like, ooh, that's like, a problem. Like, we're nitpicking here by saying you might not have enough creation in the playoffs. Like, that's a nitpick. Like, we don't look at this team and be like, wow, they lack in rebounding, or they lack in defense, or they don't have 3-point shooting or creation. They have it all. It's just we're getting nitpicky here because that's what you get to do with teams that are really well constructed and really good. Yeah, pretty much. Like, the biggest issue that you probably have with the Jazz, if you're an average fan, is that they don't have enough guys that you recognize off the top of your head. They just have a bunch of middle tier guys that are playing super well. And I think that these are guys that can continue to keep it up. Yeah. Bringing Derek Favors back was huge for them.
Oh, yeah. Not relying on Tony Bradley, or I thought that the Udoka Azubuike draft pick in the draft this year was going to be interesting, because I thought that he was going to be their backup center. Then they go and got Derek Favors, who is pretty much a career Jazz. He played on the Pelicans for a minute, but he was with the Jazz forever. And the fact that he can come in, be a bench guy, go work with Dan Quinn again, or Quinn Snyder. I'm sorry. Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn is the old Seahawks defensive coordinator and Atlanta Falcons head coach.
Yeah.
Quinn Snyder. My apologies, people. I'm thinking Super Bowl right now. I'm so excited for it. Quinn Snyder is producing at Coach of the Year kind of quality, and it's amazing. And Derek Favors is just such a good fit, being able to come back into a system he feels comfortable in, and doesn't have to be the star. He can just go be the guy behind Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to ask you some questions. I've done this at most of our deep dives.
Let's do it.
So on this team right now, who is your favorite player? Like, what player stands out to you that is most important? Like your favorite player on this team?
I think that the biggest X factor is going to end up being Conley. Conley was their big get last year. He was a big reason that everyone was starting to use that dark horse contender verbiage with the Jazz, and they kind of underperformed. And a big part of that was because Conley never really clicked. It never really conspired to be this really great thing with the Jazz at any point last year, and that's where people were disappointed. Now, Conley really is playing well, and he's not playing well in that he's averaging 25 points a game. It's 16 and a half points per game. It's 5.9 assists. It's 3.7 rebounds, but it's on 46.3% from the field and 42.2% from 3-point arc. That is a guy who is highly efficient on the court for you. He does everything that you want of a starting point guard. And offensively, defensively, he's the vet of this team that really brings everything together. And I think that as long as Conley is keeping this whatever, like this environment clicking, I think a lot of it runs around Conley as the X factor.
Yeah.
And I also just love Conley.
I think that's a good thing. He plays good defense. He creates. He does a lot of the dirty work for this team. And he's doing everything efficiently, which is huge because that was one of his problems last year was he wasn't being efficient, which is just so unlike Conley. His whole career, he's been such an efficient player.
Yeah, and he's so nice. So I would have to fact check this, but I'm pretty sure Jack told me this, who's a career Grizzly fan. And I don't think he has ever had a technical foul in his career.
Really?
Ever. And like in like
that's wild.
In like hundreds of games. Like I don't think he's ever had a technical foul. I think he got one technical foul and the NBA rescinded it the next day.
No way.
Yeah, I think. So he's just like, he's the ultimate vet. Like he's such a great locker room guy and he always seems to be doing the right thing. And so it's fun to watch Conley actually play well. I would make the argument that Conley is one of the best players to not make an All-Star game.
So in 788 regular season games and 56 playoff games, Mike Conley has never received a technical foul. He did receive one, but it was rescinded after the league reviewed the tapes.
Mike Conley.
Wow.
Good guy Mike Conley. Over 800 NBA games played and has never gotten a technical foul.
That's hard to do.
The restraint on that man.
Wow.
I'd get a technical easily at some point.
Wild to me. All right.
Yeah. So a fun deep dive Conley stat for you there.
That is crazy. All right. Well, okay. So let's continue with these questions for you. What is a successful season for the Jazz given this point that they're at?
All right. I'm going to go from the perspective of like, if I'm a Jazz fan and we are sitting at the number 2 seed, we are on a 9-game win streak. We haven't had really to deal with any injury issues or anything. So I'm thinking like, this is like the way our team should be playing if healthy. I think that we should at least make the conference finals.
Wow.
We should at least be a conference finals team.
So that is a successful season for you.
Yes. Okay. So I would say that like it would be successful to win the first round. Like if you play against the Clippers and you play well, you go to 7 or whatever, I would be happy with that. But if I'm the Jazz, I think that this is one of the best teams that we've constructed in a long time. And they were playing super well. You got young talent going up. You got with Donovan Mitchell. You got talent in their prime with Rudy Gobert. You got a whole bunch of vets that like is fitting and you're playing well. I think that this team is a team that should make the conference finals and has a chance to win a championship.
All right. I mean, I agree with you. This team is hot, and I think a conference finals is a bit of a stretch. I think winning a series is more in where they're at. But I mean, it's all based on matchups. It depends who they play and how they play and a bunch of things. And again, it's early in the season. What would be a disappointing season if you're the Jazz?
Disappointing season would be losing in the first round because I feel like it's fairly guaranteed that they're going to be a playoff team. And I think, like, let's say you do make it to the second round, you play okay. Like, you're going to be like, well, we did our best. Like, it was a good season. If you lose in the first round again, like say you play the Nuggets and you lose again in the first round, that I think it would be a huge disappointment. That'd be a big blow and would probably knock the Jazz back a few years.
Yeah, especially after giving the bag to Rudy Gobert and kind of buying into this being your core and, you know, Rudy Gobert not being a guy who's going to get much better than what he is. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of, not a lot riding on this season, but you need to see some improvement.
Yeah, because that's kind of been the knock on Donovan Mitchell. I mean, that's what Shaq was just knocking on him the other night.
Dick move by Shaq.
That was real weird. Shaq is just like, I think he kind of likes being the villain a little bit. He's like, people have been getting too chummy with me. I gotta knock him back a peg. I mean, he's not necessarily wrong to tell Donovan Mitchell, like, he came into the league and he was really good. And it's like, have you gotten better? Like, are you getting better year by year? I'm not seeing it. And it's like, I don't necessarily disagree. And him in the playoffs this year is going to be a huge barometer for that conversation going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would agree. That is our Jazz deep dive. We've kind of gotten to depth. If you're a Jazz fan, let us know what you think. And what do you think of our takes and all that stuff? If you're a Kobe fan, reach out to us. Tell us any cool stories about that you have with Kobe. I mean, we shared a couple of ours here about how he impacted us. Sad day, but also a good day to talk about a surging team, because if Kobe were here, he'd be like, stop talking about me. The Jazz are playing really badass, so talk about them.
It's very true. It's very true. If Kobe is around right now, he'd be saying, hey, quit talking about me. Start talking more about these other teams that deserve a little respect. And I think that the Jazz is a team that deserves a lot of respect.
Yep. And we'll see how they go going forward. I hope they lose the next 2 games, because the last 2 games are the Mavericks. But, we'll see. And on that note, cheers, brother. Another podcast done.
Cheers.